In 1483, Leonardo da Vinci imagined a helicopter, but he never built one. More than 400 years later, another man was mocked for chasing the same impossible dream. In 1939, he finally proved everyone wrong and changed the future of flight forever. Today, we'll uncover the incredible story of how the helicopter was really invented. Stay with us until the end.
Picture the early 1900s. Airplanes existed, but they were fragile, dangerous, and completely dependent on long open runways. A pilot needed speed to survive. Without a clear stretch of land, without wind, without room to accelerate, a plane was useless. Cities had no place for this kind of machine. Mountains blocked it entirely. Ships at sea could not use it at all. If a plane crashed in a forest, in a jungle, or on a cliffside, rescue was almost impossible. Injured soldiers bled out for hours waiting for help that could never reach them. Doctors in remote villages had no way to reach patients trapped by flooded rivers or snowed-in mountain roads. A ship sinking in the middle of the ocean had no realistic hope of aerial rescue. For centuries, inventors dreamed of a different kind of flying machine. One that could rise straight up from a single spot. One that could hover in place, turn in the air, and land almost anywhere. Leonardo da Vinci had sketched such a machine back in 1483, calling it an aerial screw. Was never built, and it likely could never have flown. But the idea planted itself deep in human imagination. By the early 20th century, dozens of engineers across Europe and America chased that same dream. Most of them failed. Machines shook themselves apart. Rotors spun out of control. Test pilots walked away with broken bones, if they walked away at all. The dream of vertical flight had become a graveyard of broken prototypes and shattered reputations. Nobody had figured out how to make it stable. Nobody had figured out how to make it safe. And by 1930, most serious engineers had quietly given up. The helicopter, it seemed, was destined to remain a fantasy. Even the word impossible followed the idea everywhere it went. Scientific journals published papers arguing that a stable single-rotor aircraft violated basic laws of physics. Investors refused to fund any project connected to vertical flight, fearing it was a waste of money. The dream that had survived for centuries now seemed one failed prototype away from vanishing forever. Somewhere in a small office in Connecticut, one aging airplane designer refused to accept that conclusion. He still had Da Vinci's sketch tucked away in the back of his mind, waiting for its moment. He had already tried and failed once, decades earlier, as a young man in Russia. Nobody watching him in 1930 could have guessed he would be the one to finally solve it. In 1889, a boy named Igor Sikorsky was born in Kiev, in the Russian Empire. His mother told him stories about Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines before he could even read. Those stories lodged themselves in the boy's mind and never left. By the time he was a teenager, Sikorsky was already obsessed with the idea of a machine that could rise straight into the sky. He studied engineering in Kiev and then in Paris, soaking up everything the era's aviation pioneers knew. In 1908, at just 19 years old, he witnessed early demonstrations of powered flight. That was the moment his obsession became a mission. He came home and told his family he intended to build a machine that could fly straight up. Most of them assumed he would grow out of it, the way children grow out of any fantastic dream. He returned home to Russia and began building. His first helicopter attempt came in 1909. It never lifted off the ground. His second attempt came in 1910. It rose a few inches into the air, then collapsed under its own weight. Sikorsky ran out of money. He ran out of parts. Worse, he ran out of belief from the people around him. Engineers he respected told him bluntly that a stable helicopter was mathematically impossible to build. So Sikorsky did something almost unthinkable. He walked away from the helicopter entirely. For the next 25 years, he built fixed-wing airplanes instead, eventually becoming one of the most respected aircraft designers in the world. He designed massive multi-engine planes in Russia. He fled the Russian Revolution in 1917 with almost nothing but a suitcase. He arrived in the United States in 1919 as a refugee with no money and no guaranteed future. He scraped together a living teaching mathematics to fellow Russian immigrants in New York. On weekends, he gathered old friends and built airplane parts in a rented barn on Long Island. Slowly, through sheer stubbornness, his aviation company began to grow. By the 1930s, Sikorsky was building some of the most advanced flying boats in America. But he never stopped thinking about vertical flight. Late at night, after his official work was finished, he sketched rotor designs on scraps of paper. He was in his late 40s now, an age when most engineers would call their careers complete. Then, in 1938, everything changed. Sikorsky's aircraft company had struggled financially during the Great Depression. His employer, United Aircraft, finally agreed to fund one small experimental project, his old obsession, the helicopter. He was given a tiny team, a limited budget, and very little time. He designed a strange-looking aircraft with a single main rotor and a small tail rotor to stop it from spinning. Many engineers thought the design was doomed to fail just like everything before it. Sikorsky called it the VS-300. On September 14, 1939, Sikorsky climbed into the pilot's seat himself. He was nearly 50 years old, testing his own invention with his own life on the line. The engine roared. The rotor blades spun faster and faster. And then, for the first time, the machine lifted straight up off the ground and held steady in the air. Here is the surprising fact almost nobody knows. The VS-300 was wildly unstable for its first several test flights, tipping and lurching in every direction. Sikorsky crashed it more than once, climbing out of the wreckage and rebuilding it again and again. It took nearly 2 more years of relentless redesign before the aircraft could fly safely and reliably. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't chasing fortune. He was finishing a promise he made to a childhood story about Leonardo da Vinci. 30 years after his first failed attempt, Igor Sikorsky had finally done what the world's best engineers called impossible. His own daughter later recalled that he kept a small drawing of Da Vinci's aerial screw pinned above his desk for his entire career. Colleagues who once mocked his obsession now stood on the airfield in silence, watching the impossible machine hover exactly where he had placed it. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the steady beat of rotor blades cutting through the September air. The VS-300's success in 1939 was only the beginning. Sikorsky spent the next 2 years refining the aircraft in full public view, crashing and rebuilding it more than a dozen times. By 1941, the VS-300 set a world endurance record, staying airborne for over an hour and a half. In 1942, Sikorsky's next design, the R-4, became the world's first helicopter to enter mass production. The United States military immediately saw its potential. Pilots could now reach places no airplane ever could. During World War II, R-4 helicopters performed daring rescues that seemed impossible only years earlier. In 1944, an R-4 flew into the jungles of Burma to rescue downed airmen trapped behind enemy lines. It was the first combat rescue by helicopter in history. Soldiers who once had no hope of survival suddenly had a machine that could reach them. Newspapers back home began printing headlines calling the helicopter a miracle machine. The same invention that engineers had mocked for decades was now front-page news around the world. But Sikorsky wasn't the only one racing toward this future. Rival engineers across the world fought bitterly over rotor designs and patents. In Germany, engineers had built experimental helicopters years earlier, but war and politics buried their progress. In the United States, competitors like Bell Aircraft rushed to build rival designs, sparking a fierce commercial race. Patent disputes exploded throughout the 1940s. Multiple inventors claimed credit for key rotor innovations, and courtrooms became almost as busy as workshops. Sikorsky's early patents, filed decades before his success, ultimately gave him a powerful legal advantage. By 1945, helicopters were no longer experimental curiosities. They were becoming essential tools for militaries, and soon, for civilians too. The Korean War, beginning in 1950, transformed the helicopter's reputation entirely. Medevac helicopters pulled wounded soldiers from the battlefield and delivered them to hospitals within minutes instead of hours. Survival rates for critically injured soldiers rose dramatically because of this single innovation. Through the 1950s, helicopters expanded rapidly beyond the battlefield. Police departments began using them for surveillance and traffic control. News stations adopted them for live aerial reporting. Oil companies used them to reach offshore platforms no boat could access quickly. Meanwhile, Sikorsky himself kept pushing his designs further. In 1943, he introduced the R6, a lighter and more reliable successor to the R4. It could carry heavier loads and fly longer distances without breaking down mid-flight. Military commanders who once dismissed the helicopter as a novelty now demanded it for every branch of service. Not every rival succeeded. Some competitors' designs shook themselves apart in testing, echoing the failures of decades earlier. Others ran out of funding before a single prototype ever left the ground. The path to a reliable helicopter remained littered with wreckage, both financial and literal. Still, the technology kept accelerating. In 1956, Sikorsky's company introduced the S-58, a helicopter powerful enough to carry over a dozen passengers at once. For the first time, ordinary people could imagine flying somewhere without ever needing a runway. Airlines in cities like New York and Los Angeles even experimented with short helicopter shuttle routes between airports. The idea seemed radical at the time, a taxi service that took to the sky instead of the street. Though most of these early commercial routes eventually folded, they proved something remarkable. The helicopter had crossed the line from military tool to everyday transportation. By 1960, helicopters were saving lives in hospitals, disaster zones, and mountain rescues across the globe. What began as Leonardo da Vinci's 400-year-old sketch had become an everyday tool of modern civilization. The machine once called impossible was now considered indispensable. Today, helicopters save an estimated tens of thousands of lives every single year through medical evacuation alone. In the United States, hospitals rely on medical helicopters to reach accident victims in rural areas within what doctors call the golden hour, the critical window when fast treatment can mean the difference between life and death. Firefighters use helicopters to drop water on wildfires burning in terrain no truck could ever reach. Coast Guard crews pull stranded sailors from sinking ships in storms that would make any other rescue impossible. Search and rescue teams in mountain ranges depend entirely on the machine Sikorsky once built in a rented barn. Modern helicopters can fly faster than 180 miles per hour and operate in conditions that would ground most fixed-wing aircraft. They deliver organs for life-saving transplants across cities in minutes instead of hours. They evacuate flood victims from rooftops during hurricanes. They carry news crews above wildfires, protests, and breaking events as they happen live. Without the helicopter, entire industries as we know them would not exist. Offshore oil platforms would be nearly impossible to staff and supply. Remote scientific research stations in Antarctica and the Arctic depend on helicopter transport for survival. Even something as ordinary as a traffic report during your morning commute traces back to Sikorsky's stubborn dream. Construction crews use heavy-lift helicopters to place massive equipment on skyscrapers where cranes cannot reach. Farmers rely on them to spray vast fields of crops in a fraction of the time ground vehicles would take. Film crews strap cameras to helicopters to capture sweeping shots that once seemed physically impossible. In disaster zones, helicopters remain one of the only tools capable of reaching survivors when roads, bridges, and airports are destroyed. After earthquakes, hurricanes, and tsunamis, they are often the very first machines to arrive. For millions of people around the world, a helicopter overhead has meant the difference between rescue and abandonment. There are now more than 60,000 civilian helicopters operating around the world today, alongside thousands more in military service. Every single one of them traces its lineage directly back to a barn on Long Island, and further still, to a sketch drawn in Florence more than 500 years ago. The next time you hear rotor blades cutting through the air above a city, remember what that sound represents. It is the sound of a 400-year-old sketch finally brought to life. It is the sound of a man who refused to let one failure in 1910 define the rest of his story. It is a sound that, statistically, someone somewhere is hearing as a rescue rather than a disaster.
Here is the strangest twist of all. Leonardo da Vinci never built a working machine, and his design likely could never have flown. Igor Sikorsky spent nearly 30 years being told his dream was impossible. So who deserves the credit? The genius who imagined it first, or the outsider who refused to quit? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more untold origins and remarkable true stories from the past. Some inventions are not born from brilliance alone. They are born from stubborn refusal to quit.